Hello, welcome to the Matchbook Horse Racing Review with Sam Turner and I. Don McLean is still recovering from his trip away, and quite right too. So Sam Turner is the other side of the screen this week. And I'm sure, Sam, you've enjoyed a fantastic Welcome to Yorkshire Ebor Festival, which we were just talking about the Wednesday and all the action there. I had to remind myself, it feels like an age ago.
Yeah, it was a magnificent week, wasn't it, Tom? Plenty of marquee performances. Obviously, in Ebor, Stradivarius, Mum's Tipple, Mustajir. I mean, there's tons to go at. Absolute mouth-watering fare on the Naze Mile. We were treated to some pretty good weather in the main and consistent ground as well. Some tons of track records tumbled. And William Darby and his team really do deserve the utmost credit for producing one of the pivotal weeks of the year. Really, it's a magnificent week now. Obviously, the prize money has been ramped to the max. That's attracted strong fields from both sides of the Irish Sea and even, Japanese raiders as well. So, got a great blend, a great mix of good quality racing, a fantastic racecourse, solid ground, so punters and tipsters alike could have a little bit of confidence in what they were playing with. And, as I say, some marquee performances and some astonishing performances. And the heartwarming thing of the week really was I don't know whether the Yorkshire public just take this week to, into the bosom, don't they, Tom? And they really enjoy seeing their stars there, the Enables, the Stradivarius. They're 10 deep, when Enables go around the paddock. They want to embrace these horses, and we'll touch on it later, of course, but marvellous to see her winning the style that she did.
Yeah, it was great as well to see. I think as you say, the public in the open land in the middle coming and taking photos of her as she was having a wash down or from over the way, and then her walk back through the middle of the track. That was great to see. We'll come to Jer Lyons as well. What a season he's having, but winning the first £1 million Sky Bet. Ebor, having picked the horse up for 50 grand. It's quite a good return. Just trying to work that out.
Not bad, yeah. Not bad.
You take that. So let's start though with I suppose one of the key questions that came out of the week, and that is on the Wednesday and the Thursday, the two feature races went to two brilliant horses, and it was Crystal Ocean and Enable who had faced each other last time. They of course raced in their respective different races, but Crystal Ocean's colours were lowered by Japan, the 3-year-old, and Enable the following day went and did what I think everyone expected her to do and go and win her second Darley Yorkshire Oaks. She's now the highest rated horse in the world. I know you'll be happy about that, Sam.
I think that sits a little bit more comfortably with us, doesn't it? But I mean, the nuts and bolts of it were, and these figures aren't just plucked out of thin air. There was a lot of very clever people on a significantly higher pay grade than me that felt that Crystal Ocean, or the figures backed it up, he was deserved of that title. And you can't knock that. There are processes and various procedures that are taken to come up with these ratings, and just because visually and your heart tells you that you would like Enable to be the top rated racehorse in the world, it doesn't mean that can follow. So it was a really stylish, polished performance. You take on board, obviously Declan Ricks, friend of the show, would say that perhaps Magical was having a little bit of a tee up with view to the Irish Champion Stakes, so she might not have been fully wound up. But Enable still beat her by double the distance that she has done in the two previous meetings. And, it was just Victoria-esque, really. He's on the best filly in the race. He dictated the pace. He set perfect fractions. And he strode majestically clear up the Naze Mile for a comfortable victory.
So do you think, realistically, Japan, the fact that he will be getting weight in an arc, though not as much as it were she a colt, but do you think you can see this horse, there's 5 points between them currently, 2.0 versus 7.0, genuinely beating her in her search for a third arc? Or if she is 100%, to your mind, is she unbeatable?
I think the draw will have a big factor. Obviously, she benefited from the draw, whereas Sea of Class didn't 12 months ago, and that can play a massive part. I think the training of Japan has been exemplary this year. Obviously, he was a slow burner in the spring. He hadn't come to hand. They took him to the Dante for a jog round. He caught the eye. He ran a lovely race there. He moved forward significantly into the Derby, and he has done with each start subsequently. And I thought for him to win over Romana Quarter on fast ground at York last week was a pretty stunning performance. I know there's a lot of people that would like to crib the form, and I understand that. They all ended up in a bit of a mess, and King of Comedy didn't settle, and he was too keen, didn't run his race. Elacan was falling over the back of him for the last furlong and couldn't get a clear run. But Japan was in the right place at the right time, and he still beat the highest rated racehorse in the world going into the race under conditions that wouldn't necessarily seem to the greatest of effect. 10 furlongs. He was trying something, well, other than the Dante, something that he hadn't tried before. And it's a remarkable piece of training, really, to have managed to get him to peak for that race over 10 furlongs. And then he'll go on to the Champion Stakes. So there's still a bit of water to go under the bridge first before we see Enable and Japan lock horns in the autumn. But, you know, the fact that he is finishing the season, or the second portion of the season, very strongly, it is a concern for Enable fans. I do think, you know, that there's a general view that she's certainly not better than she was last year or in a 3-year-old year. She's maintaining that level, and she's being trained and ridden to do so, to ensure that her longevity lasts until October in Paris. But, you know, I think Japan is very much on the upgrade, and I think he'll give her a stiff competition.
Yeah, I think coming into this year, he was considered the Ballydor 3-year-old that they were perhaps most excited about. Things didn't work out in the Dante purely because of time. They had a setback, and I think it was, you know, there was no secret about the fact that both he and the eventual Derby winner had been kept back for the later trials purely because of where they were. Now, we're finally seeing just how good Japan is with certainly his last 3 performances. But I think the draw could be key. The other point you made there about, you know, Elakan perhaps being a touch unlucky and Japan being in the right place at the right time. But, I mean, you often see that good horses and allow themselves to be put into those places as well, don't you? And we've seen that with Enable, I think, throughout her career. I think Japan is a proper danger. I mean, a serious threat.
Yeah.
I probably, like you, just want to see that one of them may well have, as you say, another race before we get there, but want to see where the cards fall, if you like, draw-wise. I think that could be cool. But I think his presence and the fact that he's beaten Crystal Ocean make it all the more exciting. I mean, everybody wants to see her win it, don't they? But equally, I'm glad that it doesn't look as though it's going to be easy. Not that an arc is ever going to be easy. So
no,
he's going to make it very interesting. You know, the Jumpmont team will be frightened enough of him, won't they?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. I think that's the key with him. I do think there is a world-class performance there over 12 furlongs when, you know, he goes into a race fully, you know, motivated, trained to the minute, and peaking at the right time. I don't think he's had that set of conditions yet which can see him produce that marquee performance, to use that phrase. But I have been really impressed with Enable. I mean, her durability as well as her class is astonishing, really. You know, not many of us really felt that she was going to turn up at York in the week, and fair play to Ballydor for supplementing Magical, because that made it became a race, really. Rather than people turning up to see a race horse in Enable, they turned up to see a race between her and Magical, her old foe. And, you know, for a furlong, it looked like being a race until Enable could put a stamp of class on the race. But, you know, I just think with Enable, there was so much pressure going around that day. I mean, there's an Enable, try saying that, there is an Enable gym bar. There, you know, there were cut-out caricatures. You could have your picture taken in front of Enable. The whole meeting, pretty much, and that day at York was geared up to sort of crown Enable the Queen of York. And it could have gone horribly wrong. Thankfully, we were in the hands of, you know, true brilliant professionals and practitioners in Bosden and Vittori who know exactly where they are with these horses and know exactly what preparation they need to step forward to another particular race. And they felt it was a risk worth taking, and she you know, sort of paid off that risk in dividends, really. And you know, she was very smooth, very emphatic, and, you know, all the things we expect from Enable, she delivered. And it's incredible, really, how these horses like Enable, Stradivarius, etc., just turn up like clockwork and just win. It's you know, we are really blessed, and we are being a little bit spoiled.
I think on the face of it, giving £3 to Japan, I think is, as the market reflects, more than doable. But that draw could make it interesting. Anyway, we'll get there and we'll see what happens between now and then. But it's fantastic they're going to go and take each other on. As far as marquee performances, Sam, we saw Battaash win the Coolmore Nunthorpe on the Friday in a course record time. He beat the time that has stood for so long of Dejeux, who was also, of course, owned by Sheikh Hamdan Al Maktoum, who incidentally I managed to ask after the race, who in your mind was the quicker horse, the better horse, and he said, Dejeux was always the quickest. But there you go. He wasn't clouded by recency bias, but that was fantastic for Battaash, wasn't it? And Charlie Hills was emotional after the race because I think he felt a lot of pressure coming into it. Now, the one thing I take out of it is clearly it helped. I think two things helped in a big way. One, not giving the horse a hard race at Goodwood, because it meant that Goodwood didn't take anything out of him. Whereas he's always come to York, I think, off the back of his season's best performance at Goodwood. And actually, he wasn't so electric at Goodwood, and therefore perhaps we had a bit more horse left. This would have taken a bit out of him. But the other thing that clearly helped was spending a night in his own bed, as Charlie Hills put it, and going up on the morning. Now, that's all well and good with regard to York, but if they want to follow in Dejeux's footsteps and go out to the Breeders' Cup, for all he was beaten when he jumped the shadow of the stand on the dirt, but if they want to go and try and win out there, you're not going to get a night in your own bed the night before, are you? So I think that's one thing to bear in mind with this horse. For he was brilliant on Friday at York.
Yeah, unless Charlie Hills has got a time machine, he is going to struggle, isn't he? The one point that I took from a lot of the Charlie Hills quotes, and he's reiterated through the year, is that Battaash has been a much easier horse to train this year. Now, I'm not convinced he had a particularly easy race at Goodwood. I don't think you run 5 furlongs at Goodwood, in sub 56 or 57 seconds, you have a particularly easy race. Just because he hasn't had a couple of extra taps with the whip, I still think he had to put it in to win. He wasn't his explosive best at Goodwood, so maybe they had him 95% for Goodwood and not fully revved. And they've changed his training pattern slightly to ensure that perhaps this time at York, there was no reason why this track shouldn't suit him. We're going to tinker with a couple of things. I think Charlie said it was attention to detail really as much as anything with him. So obviously having his own bed the night before, perhaps just leaving a little bit to work on prior to Goodwood and not having him rev to the max for that race. And then coming on to York, where, let's be honest, if ever you could put together a set of conditions really for Battaash, a blisteringly hot day, 5 furlongs at York, on one of the fastest 5 furlong courses in the world, absolutely tailor-made for him. There's no real reason why he shouldn't enjoy it, should he? He should absolutely relish those conditions.
And he was drawn on a wing again, Sam, and I feel there is merit in that for me. He's first of all, it's unbelievable how often he's been drawn on a wing. I don't know what the percentages are, but it's happened more often than it should have done necessarily. But for me, that Kevin Blake's talked a lot about this, about how he races. But I think there's still something in it, and I agree.
Yes.
Everything led up to it being a perfect scenario for Battaash if he could get over the York factor.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, some horses might just be a little bit more claustrophobic than others. It's becoming more of just a coincidence now, isn't it? The fact that every time he is placed on a wing like that, he seems to excel. But I mean, he has been beaten when he's been away from other horses as well. I think he's been beaten at Ascot, hasn't he, when he's been drawn away from Blue Point or whatever. And it's just that track just stretches him a little bit. But it's not as if he's run absolutely abysmally at Ascot. He's run better races there than he has at York previously. But finally, they've managed to tinker with his training pattern, and they've found a situation and a set of circumstances which suit him ideally. And he's paid them back in, with a stunning performance, a marquee performance, if you like.
What was your take on 10 Sovereigns? Why did he disappoint? Because ultimately he did.
I think, I've got to be honest, I think that step back from 6 to 5 is enormous. I think you can go from 7 to 6. You can sometimes even go up from 5 to 6. But the tempo of a 5 furlong race, in a 6 furlong race, I mean, jockeys will probably tell you can actually ride a little bit of a race. And I know, the 5 furlong race is seen as the 2020 perhaps of, in cricketing parlance of the racing world. But really it's a jump and run. When you've got less than a minute, to actually organise yourself and ride tactic, I don't think they necessarily come into it. The first furlong is about getting into a rhythm and finding a pace and a tempo that suits you and a position. And then it's just jump and run, isn't it? 6, you can take a bit of cover. You can ride a race. You've got a horse there that, you've got 3 or 4 furlongs, and then you've got an electric turn of foot. You can use it at the end of a race. They don't breathe really over 5, do they? It's just done on all one breath. And I just think for 10 Sovereigns, he was stuck on the wing a little bit. He was away from the brazen speed. it was a chance worth taking, and fair play to Ballydor. They're trying to convert him into a champion sprint, and to do that, you have to go to races like the Nunthorpe. But he was taken fully out of his comfort zone. I'd expect him to bounce back over 6 somewhere, but 5 on a track like York just looks, he was just literally, they were going 2 to his 1, weren't they?
Yeah, a flying 5, Group 1 company, and now up against who turns out to be the second highest rated horse in the world in the Battaash. It's a different beast, isn't it? And maybe a stiff 5 going forward. Whether they keep him in training, they might try and campaign him in that sort of way. Could he? You'd probably say Diamond Jubilee looking ahead to next year, but then that you've got a King Stand, they could mix it up that way. But if he's, I'm not sure if there's any quotes about him staying in training. I don't know, but that was just too tall an order, I think. As far as the stayers across the week went, Sam, we had Stradivarius, we had Mustajir winning the first £1 million Sky Bet Ebor, and we had Logician winning the Great Voltager, and now has been installed as favourite for the St Ledger. Just first on Stradivarius, I don't. In what time we have to do this, I don't think I have to say much other than I cannot see how this horse is going to be beaten again over a staying trip. He is just too good, and I think he helps himself by never being too fashion, saving a bit for himself as well. I think that probably makes John Gosden's life that little bit easier. But do you have anything to say or add on Stradivarius?
Not a fat lot, other than I've given up trying to take him on. I tried for the last time at Goodwood. I thought that track and the way the race might be run would suit cross counter, but he had cross counter had a target on his back with Stradivarius 2 lengths behind him. He picked him up, trounced him, and although DXB gave it a good go both at Goodwood and at York, there aren't any chinks in his armour, are there? He's a stayer with speed, with a turn of foot, and that's a deadly combination for any rival, really. You can ride him any which way you like. You wouldn't want to be in front too soon, but you never have to be if DXB's in the race, because he'll cut out all the donkey work for you. So not a lot to add. Another very smooth and emphatic performance, and he almost typifies the synchronicity between Dittori and these Gosden horses for me. Just that Frankie just knows exactly the best way to get the best out of Stradivarius and exactly the best place to be in a race and what to track. And he's tactical genius this year. And I know things have gone for him. He's won a few short heads contests and duels that in other previous years he wouldn't have won. So there is danger of just over egging the pudding a little bit and saying how brilliant he is when he's had a little bit of fortune. And we all know, having watched the cricket over the weekend, that if you don't have that bit of fortune in sport, you are stuffed. But Dittori really has been the architect of his own success in a lot of these races. He's always been in the right position at the right time. It's been a golden summer for him, and this horse is synonymous with that.
And as far as Mustajir went, more about the race. Great for J Lions. Great they picked this up for 50,000 guineas. He was formerly in Sheikh Hamdan colours, trained by Owen Burrows. But it's a great season they've had, and a huge return on investment for them. Fantastic. But I thought, just as a whole, not that it's a new concept of a race, but no 3-year-olds. Because obviously it would detract from the ledger, the amount of horses going for that, given the prize money on offer. But I felt it worked, the £1 million on offer. You had to be 105 to get in, etc. The winner's rated 108. There's been contesting pattern company races. But for me, the build up to it and everything, I felt it worked. This nice new look Ebor with 22 runners, I think we're allowed to call it. For me, it worked, and I think it makes it that bit more exciting going forward. Melbourne Cup's a different beast, and given the history of that, trying to replicate that's going to be difficult, but they're on a path to that at least, and ultimately I think it was a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrific for Ger Lions, and God knows Irish racing needs a strong Ger Lions, really, because obviously with Aidan training, with Joseph training, and Donica perhaps not far away from training, they're each going to have 200 plus horses. It is beginning to become a very much an O'Brien monopoly. So we need Ger Lions, we need him to produce Mustajirs, Siskins, those sort of horses. We need him to be strong. With John Ox obviously struggling for form, Dermot Well perhaps not the force he once was. So Irish racing certainly needs Ger Lions to be very competitive and combative. And there's plenty of things you could describe Ger Lions as, and combative is certainly one of them. I think he was on the mower, cutting the grass just after watching Mustajir win. It wasn't over at York. He's certainly a character.
On social media as well. He's refreshing.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't want to get into an argument with him because I don't think he'd back down.
No.
I think I love him. He's refreshing. He's brilliant. He says what he thinks, and I'm in the fan camp without a doubt.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, he could fall out with himself in a phone box, couldn't he, Jer? But I do love the fact that, you know, he speaks his mind. It's refreshing. We shouldn't inhibit that. And he's obviously got his issues with the racing post. He wouldn't be the only trainer to have those. But, you know, he's, I mean, even after Siskin won, he managed to cause a bit of a ruffle and spark a little bit of debate on social media. With his little issue with the racing post, but that shouldn't detract from the fact that he's got a brilliant training organisation, got a good team behind him. As I say, we need him to be strong and to increase competition in Ireland is vital.
Yeah, and a jockey who's had a brilliant season with him as well in the form of Colin Keane.
Yes.
Now, Logician, I think, had to be cemented as favourite for the St Ledger off the back of his performance. And he was electric, and he's unbeaten. And I know he ran in a handicap last time, but hey, that he was a good thing for that, and so the market proved on that occasion. But I sort of felt on paper it was a disappointing turnout for the Great Voltager, and I still, you know, I supported, and I think we all did on the Matchbook pod previewing the race. We were all in Constantinople's camp. We were fighting for who was going to get the best bet of Constantinople. That worked out well. But as my sort of opinion of that horse develops, so too do I have a slight niggle about the form of that race, because I don't think Constantinople is the easiest of horses to win with necessarily. For he was beaten fair and square by Logician. I know there are some out there that think some headgear on Constantinople will help, but draws, I think, if you say that. But I would, for all I was very impressed with Logician, I'd have a slight caveat to that of how good was that form in the Great Voltager, and so I'd be a little bit more tepid on an ultimately very impressive Logician off the back of that.
I know what you're saying. I do get it, because obviously Constantinople looked a very awkward ride at Goodwood. I don't think he did a lot wrong at Ascot, if I'm honest. I just love Logician. I think he's a beautiful horse. He's got a fantastic way of going. I think I compared him, you know, the way that he gallops to, you know, a David Gower cover drive, really. He's just very languid and just very smooth. And I don't think he does anything particularly quickly, but I think he's going to be some horse next year. I mean, the time of that race compared to the rest of the card, obviously you could stand it up with the Juddmonte, the 2 mile handicap, the 7 furlong Acomb, which was a bit of a stop-start gallop, admittedly. But the time and his time at Newbury, even though he was 5 on in a handicap, they suggest he could be a very, very talented middle distance horse. And I'm not sure, speaking to 1 or 2 people after the race, whether he's an absolutely nailed on certainty to go for St Ledger. I think they're very much.
I'm going to ask you about that. I mean, I think because of the Gosden factor, and I think people look at it almost as they kept him away from the earlier classics with regard to, not that Gosden always does that. I think Mars Marble ran in a derby, but. I sort of felt that the feeling coming into it was this is the Ledger horse, but off the back of it, it's not. You don't think it's nailed on? He'll turn up there.
I think all options are open. That's the buzz phrase, isn't it? And I think he's the type of horse that, I don't know. You've got to be very careful what you say about the Ledger, because 1 or 2, you know, you say, oh, Japan won't go for a Ledger. Oh no, he's too good for that. And if we're not careful, we're going to completely denigrate what is one of the flat season's great races and just turn it into, you know, an afterthought for a lot of people. And if we're not careful, we need to just protect the heritage of this great race. But I do think Logician, they are eyeing races next year, you know, starting with races like, you know, the Royal Ascot Hardwick that they're going through, and seeing him as a possible successor for Ebor. And it is great to see these colours. They're so synonymous with York. Obviously because of the sponsorship of the Juddmonte International, etc., and Prince Khalid. Just they seem to just keep unveiling these potentially world-class horses to follow in the line of Ebor, really. And I think Logician could be exceptional. They keep the wheels on him. He's obviously been very patiently trained. He's in the hands of a master who can just work out very quickly. And we see this with Stout, Aidan O'Brien, John Gosden. They just see the bigger picture with these horses, and he's just had his preparation meticulously monitored through the season. He's had a few confidence builders, and then he gone into the Voltager. It was a lovely stepping stone for him, and not too many runners, but just the way that he just languidly strolled across the nose mile. I know he only won by a length and 3/4, but he wasn't driven out to do it. And I just thought Constantinople, he carried his head slightly to one side, but I just don't think he could go any quicker. The overall time was phenomenal, really, for a 5-runner contest like that. So I'd be very positive about him.
And just the point you make on Logician and the power that Jubbmont have as well, the fact that he's a Frankel, he's out to Scuffle, who was a half sister to Cityscape. I mean, what Prince Khaled Abdullah has built, which I thought was put into some excellent words by Rishi Prasad in a feature they did on ITV, is unbelievable. And as far as the breeding world goes and the horses they're going to continue to produce is frightening ultimately. But I take the point, it'd be interesting to see exactly, if they didn't have an Ebor this year, do you think there's any chance this horse will be going for an arc, or are we getting ahead of ourselves?
It's a possibility. They may just view that he might just be a little too inexperienced for a test of that nature at the moment, but he's thriving and he's going forward at a rapid rate of knots. So you never say never, but obviously, fingers crossed an Ebor gets to Arc Day in one piece and they don't have to toy with that possibility. But when you think Calix is out injured as well, that's another potential superstar. There's probably one or two others that I've sort of, I can't think of at the top of my head that look exceptional as well. So they've got plenty of strength in depth in most divisions.
Yeah, I'm glad you're really taken with that horse. That's buoyed me again, and time-wise, I think that's an interesting point. Now, 2-year-olds, we'll finish up with a sort of 2-year-old section on what we saw over the last 4 days. I think the two clear ones were both trained by Richard Hannon. They're both sons of Footsteps in the Sand in the form of Threat and Mum's Tipple. I'll start with Threat, and then you go with Mum's Tipple. So there you go. I was at Newmarket and thrust a microphone in Richard Hannon's face after Threat won on debut over 5 furlongs. And he said, I can't believe he's winning over 5 furlongs. He's a horse for next year. He'll almost certainly go to the Coventry, given the record they've got in that race. And I can't wait to step him up in trip. And I think he's a proper horse. Now, I think all of that has come to the fore, but still the 3-year-old campaign is something he kept mentioning, and the fact is they see this horse as their Guineas star. We'll come to Mum's Tipple, but that's how they see this horse. I'm convinced of it. Now, I thought that was his most polished performance at the weekend. No disgrace in what happened at Ascot. Disappointing at Goodwood, and Richard Hannon said that was the most disappointment he'd had this year coming away from a race. I think he said, because he really didn't think he'd be beaten. But I'm excited to see this horse up in trip, and I'm nigh on convinced this horse will go for the Dewhurst. I think that's exactly where they want to run him, and that's exactly where they will run him. He kept talking about stepping up in trip, and if you're going to find out if you've got a Guineas horse and that is where you want to put him, surely you're going to go for the Dewhurst. I know he's in the Middle Park, he's in all the big races, you've got a Mill Reef as well, but I'm convinced they're going to go up in trip and go for a Dewhurst. So where does that leave us with Mum's Tipple, Sam? A brilliant performance, because they're surely not going to run these horses in the same race. No,
and Mum's Tipple probably bought more a Middle Park horse, would you think? Brazen speed. I think he's sort of second favourite, is he, for a Commonwealth Cup, something like that. And he's a Footsteps in the Sand. You could see him stretching out, but his main attribute at the moment is the ability to travel well at the head of affairs and then kick again at a level which was totally beyond all his sales race rivals at York in the Week. So
on the clock, on the clock, is he a better horse than Threat to your mind?
Yes. On what he's done on speed figure basis so far, with the ones that I keep, yes, he is. I mean, that was sometimes when you get such a wide margin victory like that, which we very, very rarely see in a sales race of that nature. They're normally all sort of, there's a length between the first 6. They're all vying for the massive prize money that's on offer. They just couldn't get a glove on him, could they? I mean, it was just an astonishing performance, probably the most scintillating performance of the week in a lot of respects, because you were just like open mouth watching it, thinking, what have we just seen here? To step forward from the Ascot performance to that was just, well, they were just in 2 different parishes, the performances.
Well, and obviously the form got a boost with Mulhatham going on and winning for Roger Varian as well in the Convivial. There were I spoke to a couple of industry professionals, both trainers, about Mum's Tipple, and both mentioned the fact that it looked too good to be true in the sales race, and ultimately, yes, he was the best horse in the race, but will he actually turn out to be that good, and whether or not we could rely on it as a piece of form. And that was before I had a good look at the time, etc. But what would your opinion on that be? Can something like that be too good to be true, if you like, or on the clock? Is that a Group 1 performer in the making?
Look, if you look at the bare figures, yes, he can be capable of mixing it, but you want to see him do it, at the highest level, really, at Newmarket in the autumn. We're not just taking, I mean, the jump forward from the Ascot performance to York was like 20 spots on my figures. So at Ascot, he was not easy to back, but he wasn't particularly well found in the market. So you didn't have the impression that he was the second coming at Richard Hannon's yard, but he was a really nice colt that they went into the race with a bit of confidence about, without being, blown away by his chance. York, he was very, very well backed, wasn't he? Late on, he went 6 into 7 to 2, big late move. Everyone knew that he was going to be up in the van, travelling and looking to dominate the race. And I don't think Ryan Moore could quite understand that he was, or comprehend that he was so far clear. I mean, he gave him a couple of taps, didn't he, the last furlong, and got criticised for it. But he probably didn't feel that, he had that much in hand of his rival. He couldn't believe that in a sales race, he was going to be 9-10 lengths clear at the line.
You don't go into a race like that at York thinking, I'm going to win this by 11, do you?
No,
so and you almost don't get a chance to look behind you and go, where are we? You're not finishing up over 1.5 miles here. You're over 6, and you're rattling along.
Exactly. You're running sub 1 minute 10. The 2 points that I would make is that in order to be a true Group 1 horse, you have to have more than one string to your bow. So I think the fact that he's a jump and run merchant at the moment, that might leave him vulnerable as he goes. You've got to be able to change tactics. Now, he doesn't look to me as if he can only race one way. He doesn't look a real headstrong horse, Battaash perhaps, that has got to be there and thereabouts and getting on with it. He looks a pretty tractable horse. He went down to post okay from what I could see. He didn't get that warm. They look as though there could be other ways in which you could ride him. He doesn't look a one-trick pony. But you've also then got to take into effect that York can sometimes produce results like this, where you get a horse that just is on one for whatever reason, tries to dominate and then goes and bolts, a Copper Knights, those sort of horses. It favours brazen speed. So if there's one track in the country, well, perhaps a Goodwood or a Chester, where you can get loose on the lead, and if you're in that zone, you can win by a good margin. But 11 lengths is still an astonishing margin for a race of that nature.
Yeah, I'd definitely take that point with me in that if it was all going to happen for this horse, given the way he went about it, it was there. He's outclassed them comprehensively, and not wishing to make direct comparisons between the two, but going forward, I'm a little bit surprised that threat is bigger in both the main 3-year-old markets than Mum's Tipple. Just because I'm a huge fan of that horse. I like what he's done so far. Almost don't mind the fact that he's been beaten, and that I still think he's going to mature into a lovely 3-year-old. So we'll see. But I think they'll be campaigned differently, as you said. I think I think Threat will go Dewhurst, and it seems nonsensical to change the trip for Mum's Tipple, given that brace he's shown so far. Right, we're done time-wise, Sam. We're there. We've made it. Good man. We didn't talk too much about cricket either.
No, or football.
No, well, we're not going to talk about football. Quite right. After that weekend performance. Sam Turner, thank you very much indeed. That's it for the Racing Review this week. We'll be back with the podcast as ever towards the end of the week. Look forward to seeing you then. Bye for now.